One rainy night, Jasmine Carter stopped to save two abandoned golden retriever puppies she found shivering inside a cardboard box. She thought she was doing the right thing. She never imagined that a few hours later, her own father would throw her out of the family home and tell her never to come back. Homeless, heartbroken, and sleeping in her car with the two tiny puppies beside her, Jasmine believed she had lost everything. But by sunrise, a phone call about her grandfather's secret inheritance would uncover a family betrayal that had been hidden for nearly 20 years and change her life forever. Before we begin, let us know in the comments. What would you do if your own family turned their back on you when you needed them most? Cold rain covered Atlanta that Thursday evening, washing across the highways and turning every streetlight into a pale reflection on the dark pavement. Cars moved slowly through the storm while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the city. Jasmine Carter was driving home from work when she heard the sound. At first, she thought the faint cry came from her aging silver sedan, which had begun making strange noises whenever the weather turned cold. Then she heard it again as she pulled into a nearly empty gas station near the edge of the city. It was not mechanical. It was small, frightened, and alive. Jasmine was 27 years old, a tall African-American woman with warm dark brown skin, thoughtful brown eyes, and shoulder-length, natural black curls tied loosely behind her head. She had a slender figure and a gentle face that made strangers trust her easily, though those who knew her well understood that her kindness had been shaped by years of loneliness. Jasmine worked as a program coordinator for a local animal welfare nonprofit. The salary was modest, and the work often followed her home in the form of unpaid bills, late-night phone calls, and memories of animals she could not save. Still, Jasmine preferred that life to the polished offices of Carter Logistics, the transportation company founded by her grandfather and now controlled by her father. Jasmine had never wanted a corner office, a corporate title, or the responsibility of protecting the Carter family name. She wanted a small rescue center, a safe yard, and enough money to make sure frightened animals never had to sleep in the rain. Following the weak sound, Jasmine walked behind the gas station and found a soaked cardboard box pressed against the wall beneath a broken metal awning. Inside were two tiny golden retriever puppies, both no more than 8 weeks old. The first was a small male with soft, light golden fur, dark round eyes, and oversized paws that made him look as though he had not yet grown into his own body. The second was an even smaller female with pale cream-colored fur, a narrow face, and a quiet, cautious nature. The male tried to lift his head when Jasmine approached, while the female remained curled tightly against his side, trembling from the cold. Jasmine removed her coat without hesitation, wrapped both puppies inside it, and carried them to her car. "You're safe now," she whispered, even though she had no idea whether that promise was true. She named the male Sonny because he kept trying to wag his tail despite everything. She named the female Honey because of the warm golden color around her ears. As Jasmine drove toward the Carter estate, the two puppies slept together on the passenger seat, unaware that the woman who had rescued them was about to lose the only home she had ever known. The Carter residence stood behind iron gates in Buckhead, surrounded by old oak trees, stone walls, and lawns maintained so carefully that not a single fallen branch remained after a storm. The house was elegant, expensive, and nearly silent. Marcus Carter, Jasmine's 58-year-old father, had inherited control of Carter Logistics after decades of working beneath his own father, Isaac. Marcus was a broad-shouldered African-American man with deep brown skin, a strong square jaw, closely cropped black hair beginning to gray at the temples, and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard. In public, Marcus was calm, disciplined, and respected. Employees described him as a man who never raised his voice and never forgot a number. At home, however, he had become increasingly rigid since the death of Jasmine's mother 13 years earlier. Grief had not softened Marcus. It had made him suspicious of weakness, impatient with emotion, and determined to control anything that might threaten the life he had rebuilt. Vanessa Carter, Marcus's second wife, understood that fear better than anyone. Vanessa was 52, a striking African-American woman with smooth mahogany skin, a tall, graceful figure, sharp dark eyes, and long black hair worn in carefully styled waves. She spoke gently, dressed with quiet elegance, and rarely appeared openly angry. Her strength was patience. Vanessa could place an idea inside someone's mind and wait weeks for that person to believe it had been their own. Her daughter, Brianna, was 29, a slim African-American woman with honey-brown skin, almond-shaped eyes, and straight black hair that fell below her shoulders. Brianna worked as vice president of strategic development at Carter Logistics and had spent years preparing herself to move higher. She was intelligent, polished, and ambitious, but living in Jasmine's shadow had made her resentful. Jasmine did not want the company, yet under the family's ownership structure, Jasmine would eventually receive enough voting shares to influence who controlled it. To Brianna, that made Jasmine dangerous. For months, Vanessa and Brianna had quietly built a story around her. They showed Marcus copies of emails, suggesting Jasmine had contacted corporate attorneys. They arranged private meetings between consultants and people who appeared connected to Jasmine. They suggested she was pretending to reject the company while secretly waiting for Marcus to retire. The documents were false, the meetings staged, and the conclusions carefully guided. But Marcus had already begun to believe them. Each time Jasmine skipped a company dinner to volunteer at an animal shelter, Vanessa called it avoidance. Each time Jasmine refused a management position, Brianna described it as strategy. By the night of Marcus's birthday dinner, suspicion had become certainty. More than 20 relatives and business associates had gathered inside the formal dining room when Jasmine arrived carrying a pet carrier containing Sunny and Honey. She had planned to leave the puppies with a veterinary assistant, but the clinic had closed early because of the storm. Marcus looked at the carrier before he looked at his daughter. "You brought stray dogs into my home?" he asked. Jasmine explained where she had found them and promised they would stay in her room until morning. Vanessa offered a sympathetic smile that did not reach her eyes. Brianna glanced at the carrier as though it contained something dirty. Jasmine felt the familiar pressure building inside her chest. The feeling that no matter how carefully she spoke, someone had already decided what her actions meant. Dinner had barely begun when Vanessa placed a leather folder beside Marcus's plate. Her expression was reluctant, almost sorrowful. She said she had hoped to avoid discussing business during his birthday, but something had come to her attention that could not be ignored. Inside the folder were printed emails, legal memos, and records of supposed conversations between Jasmine and members of the Carter Logistics Board. The papers claimed Jasmine intended to challenge Marcus's authority, remove Brianna from her position, and use her future shares to take control of the company. Jasmine stared at the documents in disbelief. The email address resembled hers, but one letter was different. The signatures looked real from a distance, yet the language sounded nothing like her. Jasmine told Marcus the documents were false. She reminded him that she had turned down every position he had ever offered her. Marcus' face hardened. "That is exactly what makes this worse," he said. "You wanted me to believe you were not interested." Jasmine looked around the table, expecting someone to question the evidence, but her relatives avoided her eyes. Vanessa remained beside Marcus, with one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Brianna sat in silence, though Jasmine noticed the calmness in her face. This moment had not surprised either of them. It had been planned. Marcus rose from the table and ordered Jasmine to follow him upstairs. His anger remained controlled, which frightened her more than shouting would have. In Jasmine's bedroom, he pulled a suitcase from the closet and began placing her clothes inside without folding them. Jasmine tried to stop him. She asked him to call the lawyers named in the documents, to check the email addresses, to give her one night to prove the truth. Marcus refused. Years of grief, pride, and carefully planted suspicion had closed every door inside him. "I built this family back after your mother died," he said. "I will not allow you to destroy it because you think something is owed to you." The words hurt more deeply than Jasmine expected. She had spent years trying not to become another burden on him. She had paid her own bills, chosen a modest career, and avoided asking for help even when she needed it. Yet in his mind, she had somehow become a threat. Marcus carried the suitcase downstairs and placed it outside in the rain. Sunny and Honey began whining from inside the carrier. Jasmine lifted them into her arms, pressing their small, wet noses against her chest as the family gathered near the doorway. No one defended her. Vanessa watched with an expression of controlled concern. Brianna folded her arms. Marcus pointed toward the driveway. "You are no longer part of this household," he said. "Take those dogs and leave." Jasmine stood beneath the porch light with rain striking her face, waiting for some sign that he would regret the words. None came. She placed the puppies in the car, loaded her suitcase into the trunk, and drove away without looking back. Jasmine stopped several miles outside Atlanta, at a highway rest area, crowded with trucks and travelers waiting out the storm. She had less than $200 in her bank account, nowhere to stay, and no plan beyond keeping Sunny and Honey warm. She spread an old blanket across the passenger seat and shared pieces of a turkey sandwich with the puppies before they fell asleep against her stomach. Jasmine remained awake for hours, listening to rain strike the roof of the car. Anger came first, followed by humiliation, then a sadness so deep that it felt older than the evening itself. She thought about her mother, who had died when Jasmine was 14, and about her grandfather Isaac, who had always told her that a person's value did not disappear simply because someone failed to recognize it. Isaac Carter had been 82, a dignified African-American man with silver-white hair, dark watchful eyes, and a calm voice that could settle an entire room. Unlike Marcus, Isaac never confused obedience with love. He had encouraged Jasmine's work with animals, and once told her that compassion was not weakness, even in a family that treated kindness as poor business. Jasmine had not spoken with him in several weeks because his health had declined and access to him had become increasingly controlled by family members. Thinking of him made the car feel even lonelier. Shortly after sunrise, Jasmine finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, with Sunny resting beneath her chin and Honey curled inside the sleeve of her coat. A sharp vibration from her phone woke her. The rain had stopped, and pale morning light filled the parking lot. Jasmine looked at the unfamiliar number before answering. A man introduced himself as Daniel Brooks, a 61-year-old African-American estate attorney. With a measured voice and a reputation for handling private family trusts, Jasmine had never heard his name before. Daniel asked her to confirm her identity, then paused long enough for dread to enter her chest. "Miss Carter," he said gently, "your grandfather, Isaac Carter, passed away late last night." Jasmine closed her eyes as the words settled over her. Before she could respond, Daniel continued, "He left very specific instructions concerning you. You are the only member of the Carter family authorized to receive a private inheritance, and there are matters he believed you must learn before anyone else discovers what he arranged. The morning sun rose over the Atlantic coastline as Jasmine Carter drove east toward Charleston, South Carolina, following directions provided by attorney Daniel Brooks. The storm that had dominated the previous day had disappeared, replaced by clear skies and a cool ocean breeze that drifted inland. Sonny and Honey slept peacefully on a blanket spread across the back seat, unaware that the uncertainty of the previous night was slowly giving way to something neither Jasmine nor the puppies could yet understand. Jasmine spent most of the drive replaying the phone call in her mind. Isaac Carter was gone. Even after hearing the words several times, she still struggled to accept them. Of everyone in her family, her grandfather had been the one person who never made her feel like she had to earn affection. During her childhood, he attended school plays. Nobody else attended, remembered birthdays everyone else forgot, and somehow always knew when she needed encouragement before she spoke a single word. The thought that he was no longer alive left a hollow ache inside her chest. Yet alongside that grief was another emotion she could not ignore: curiosity. Why had he arranged all of this? Why had he waited until after his death to reveal whatever secrets Daniel seemed unwilling to discuss over the phone? Shortly after noon, Jasmine reached the address Daniel had provided. She slowed the car as an iron gate came into view overlooking the ocean. Beyond it stood a sprawling white estate perched on a bluff above the water. The property looked less like a private home and more like something featured in architectural magazines. Large glass windows reflected the sunlight. Stone pathways wound through carefully maintained gardens. Far below, waves rolled endlessly against the shoreline. Jasmine stopped her car and simply stared. Daniel Brooks was already waiting near the entrance. Standing beside him was another attorney Jasmine had never met. Her name was Evelyn Ross, a 64-year-old African-American woman with silver-gray hair cut neatly above her shoulders, dark, intelligent eyes behind thin reading glasses, and the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades navigating complicated legal matters. Evelyn had worked alongside Isaac Carter for nearly 15 years and possessed the same patient manner Jasmine remembered in her grandfather. Neither attorney appeared surprised by Jasmine's disbelief. "This property belongs to you now," Daniel said gently, after leading her inside. The words felt impossible. The mansion contained dozens of rooms, yet nothing about it felt cold or extravagant in the way Jasmine expected. The furnishings were elegant without being excessive. Family photographs appeared throughout the house. Several pictures included Jasmine herself as a child standing beside Isaac on fishing trips and holiday gatherings. Seeing those images nearly brought tears to her eyes. Sonny and Honey quickly forgot their nervousness and began exploring. Sonny immediately ran across a large living room rug, his oversized paws slipping on the polished floor. Honey stayed closer to Jasmine, occasionally glancing around before following her from room to room. Watching them brought a small smile to her face. For the first time since being thrown out of her father's house, she felt safe enough to breathe. After giving her time to settle, Daniel handed Jasmine a cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. "This is the first letter," he explained. "Your grandfather left very specific instructions. He wanted these opened in order." Jasmine carefully broke the seal. The moment she recognized Isaac's handwriting, her eyes filled with tears. The letter was not about money. It was about her. Isaac wrote that if she was reading the letter, events had unfolded exactly as he feared they eventually would. He admitted he had spent years worrying about what might happen after he was gone, not because he doubted Jasmine's strength, but because he knew certain people around her were motivated by ambition rather than love. Yet he urged her not to allow anger to control her decisions. He reminded her that bitterness often destroys the person, carrying it far more than the person who caused it. As Jasmine continued reading, the letter revealed something even more surprising. Isaac confessed that he had quietly helped her throughout much of her adult life. When unexpected tuition bills threatened to force her out of college, anonymous donations had appeared because of him. When her first apartment application was approved, despite financial concerns, Isaac had arranged guarantees through intermediaries. Even her first meaningful job interview had occurred because he privately encouraged someone to give her a chance. Not because she needed favoritism, because he believed she deserved fairness. By the time she finished reading, tears were running freely down her face. For years, Marcus had insisted that Jasmine succeeded only because of the Carter family name. Yet Isaac's words revealed something entirely different. Every achievement she valued most had come through her own effort. Her grandfather had simply removed obstacles placed in her path. Before leaving that afternoon, Daniel handed her a second envelope. "Open this one tonight," he said. That evening, Jasmine sat on the rear terrace overlooking the ocean. The sky glowed orange as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. Sunny slept beside her chair while Honey rested in her lap. The second letter was shorter, much shorter. Yet its final paragraph unsettled her more than everything she had read before. Isaac wrote that wealth was never the real inheritance he intended to leave behind. The house was only a beginning. Then came a sentence that remained fixed in Jasmine's mind long after she finished reading. "For nearly 20 years, someone in this family has been protecting a lie instead of protecting you." Jasmine read the sentence again and again. The words made no sense. Yet Isaac had never been careless with language. If he wrote those words, he meant them. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Atlanta, chaos had begun unfolding inside the Carter household. Vanessa and Brianna attended a meeting regarding Isaac's estate, expecting confirmation that significant portions of the family wealth would eventually pass through Marcus and his branch of the family. Instead, they learned something that left both women speechless. Large sections of Isaac's personal assets had been transferred into protected trusts years earlier. Properties, investment accounts, private holdings. Many of them were completely beyond their reach. For the first time in years, Vanessa's calm expression cracked. Brianna demanded explanations. Neither received any. The attorneys handling Isaac's estate refused to discuss details. As the meeting ended, both women realized the future they had been planning might already be slipping away. Back in Charleston, Jasmine barely slept. The following morning, Daniel and Evelyn returned carrying several archival boxes from Isaac's private office. Inside were decades of carefully organized documents, journals, correspondence, and personal records. Most appeared ordinary at first glance. Then Jasmine noticed a small brass key taped beneath one of the boxes. Evelyn smiled softly. "Your grandfather said you'd know when it's time." The key opened a hidden compartment concealed behind a bookshelf in the mansion's library. Inside sat a small steel safe. Jasmine's pulse quickened as she inserted the key. The lock clicked open. Slowly, she pulled the heavy door aside. The safe contained a single thick folder. Across the front, written in Isaac Carter's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words: "For Jasmine, your mother." With trembling hands, Jasmine opened the folder and stared at the first page. The name at the top stopped her breath. It belonged to her mother. A steady ocean breeze drifted through Charleston that morning, carrying the scent of salt water across the cliffs as waves rolled endlessly against the shore below Isaac Carter's estate. Jasmine Carter barely noticed the view anymore. For 3 days, she had spent nearly every waking hour inside the mansion's library, surrounded by stacks of folders, notebooks, and records her grandfather had carefully preserved over decades. The thick folder labeled with her mother's name sat open on the large oak table before her. Sunny and Honey had become her constant companions during those long hours. The 2 golden retriever puppies were slowly gaining weight and confidence. Sunny, always curious and energetic, seemed determined to investigate every corner of the mansion. Honey remained quieter, preferring to stay close to Jasmine's feet whenever possible. Their presence brought a small sense of comfort to a process that was becoming increasingly painful. The first documents appeared innocent enough. Jasmine found copies of medical records, family correspondence, old photographs, and financial planning papers. But as she continued reading, a pattern began to emerge. Years before her death, Jasmine's mother had established a financial trust specifically for her daughter's future. The trust contained enough money to cover college tuition, housing expenses, and provide a secure foundation for adulthood. Everything had been arranged carefully. Every detail reflected the kind of thoughtful planning only a loving parent would make. Jasmine felt her throat tighten as she studied her mother's handwritten notes. There were instructions for educational expenses, instructions for a future home purchase, instructions for emergency financial assistance if life became difficult. Her mother had thought of everything. For years, Jasmine had quietly believed that her mother never had the opportunity to prepare for her future because of her illness. The documents revealed the opposite. She had spent her final months doing everything possible to protect her daughter. Then Jasmine reached the bank records. The account balance started exactly where it should. The next year it was smaller, then smaller again. Page after page revealed withdrawals stretching across nearly 2 decades. The amounts varied. Some were relatively modest, others were substantial, yet every transaction carried the same authorized signature: Marcus Carter. Jasmine stared at the pages for several seconds. Her father. The realization felt impossible. She reviewed the records again. Then a third time, the signatures were authentic, the dates matched, the withdrawals were real. A deep sadness settled over her. Marcus had always insisted the family struggled financially after her mother's death. He had repeatedly told Jasmine there simply wasn't enough money for certain opportunities. Summer programs had been canceled. Music lessons had disappeared. Educational experiences other students enjoyed had somehow become impossible. Now she understood that money had existed, a great deal of it. The discovery left her emotionally exhausted. She pushed back from the table and walked toward the large windows overlooking the ocean. Part of her wanted to believe there had to be an explanation. Maybe Marcus intended to replace the money later. Maybe he had borrowed it temporarily during difficult years. Maybe something important was missing from the story. Isaac had warned her not to rush toward anger. Remembering those words, Jasmine forced herself to continue looking for answers. Several hours later, while she sorted through another box of records, Sunny's endless curiosity created an unexpected breakthrough. The young puppy had been chasing a tennis ball through the library when he accidentally bumped into a small rolling ladder positioned beside one of the tall bookshelves. The ladder shifted slightly. A dusty storage box resting near the top edge lost its balance and tumbled onto the floor. Jasmine jumped to her feet. Fortunately, neither puppy was hurt. The box itself had partially broken open from the fall. Dozens of documents spilled across the hardwood floor. At first, Jasmine assumed it was merely another collection of financial records. Then she noticed her grandfather's handwriting on the outside, Private copies. Do not destroy. A chill ran through her. She knelt and began examining the contents. Unlike the materials she had reviewed earlier, these records appeared far more personal. There were photocopies of signed authorizations, internal company memos, private correspondence, bank instructions. Several pages contained handwritten notes from Isaac himself. As Jasmine organized everything chronologically, a much larger picture slowly emerged. Marcus had indeed approved many of the transactions, but he had rarely acted alone. Attached to numerous documents were recommendations, financial summaries, and explanations prepared by Vanessa. Again and again, Marcus appeared to be signing paperwork based upon information she provided. In some cases, Vanessa claimed funds needed to be temporarily reallocated for family business obligations. In others, she described investments that supposedly benefited everyone. The more Jasmine read, the more complicated the story became. Her father was responsible for the signatures, yet someone else seemed to be directing the decisions. For the first time since opening the trust records, Jasmine found herself questioning assumptions she had made only hours earlier. Marcus might not simply be the villain she imagined. He might also be someone who had spent years trusting the wrong person. That possibility didn't excuse the damage, but it changed how she viewed it. Late that afternoon, Brooks, Daniel, and Evelyn Ross returned to deliver additional materials from Isaac's personal archives. As Jasmine explained what she had discovered, neither attorney appeared surprised. Daniel listened quietly before speaking. "Your grandfather struggled with this for many years," he said. "He loved his son, that never changed. But he also became increasingly concerned about who was influencing him." Evelyn nodded in agreement. There were times Isaac believed Marcus genuinely thought he was making the right decisions. The statement lingered in Jasmine's mind long after the attorneys left. As evening settled over the estate, she returned to the newly discovered box. Near the bottom she found a sealed envelope bearing another note from Isaac. The message was brief. "If you have reached this point, you are finally asking the correct questions. The answer is not in the financial records. Listen carefully." Beneath the note rested a small digital audio recorder. Jasmine's pulse quickened. She carried it to the desk and carefully connected the charger. Several minutes later, the screen illuminated. A list of recordings appeared. Most were labeled only by dates. One file stood out immediately. The title read, "Private Conversation. Do not harass." The recording length showed 17 minutes. With trembling fingers, Jasmine pressed play. Static filled the room. A chair moved somewhere in the background. Then a woman's voice emerged clearly through the speaker. Jasmine recognized it instantly. Vanessa Carter. Gray clouds gathered over Charleston as if another storm was preparing to arrive. The ocean beyond the cliffs remained calm, but inside Isaac Carter's estate, Jasmine felt as though the ground beneath her life was shifting again. The recording began with ordinary conversation. For nearly 10 minutes, Jasmine listened carefully as voices moved in and out of the audio. Then, the discussion changed. Vanessa's voice became sharper, less controlled than the polished version she presented to the world. Jasmine sat motionless as she listened. In the recording, Vanessa spoke openly about Marcus. She described him as predictable, easy to influence whenever family loyalty or business reputation was involved. She laughed while explaining that Marcus rarely questioned information if it appeared professional enough. Several times she referred to Jasmine as an obstacle that would eventually need to be removed from the company's future. The recording did not reveal every detail, but it revealed enough. By the time it ended, Jasmine felt physically exhausted. For years she had wondered why her father seemed to see the worst in her. Now she understood that someone had spent years feeding his fears. Yet, even after hearing the evidence, she found it difficult to hate Vanessa completely. The emotion she felt most strongly was sadness. So much damage had been caused by ambition disguised as concern. Daniel Brooks and Evelyn Ross arrived later that afternoon to review the materials. After listening to the recording themselves, both attorneys agreed that Isaac had anticipated this moment. Daniel explained that several additional legal documents existed and would be presented during an upcoming shareholder meeting at Carter Logistics. The meeting, originally intended to discuss the future leadership of the company after Marcus's planned retirement, was rapidly becoming something much larger. It would likely become the most important corporate gathering in the company's history. Every major shareholder would attend. Members of the press would be present. Independent auditors hired by Isaac before his death would also be there. For the first time, Jasmine realized that the truth would not remain hidden much longer. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Atlanta, Vanessa and Brianna were reaching the same conclusion. The carefully constructed future they had imagined was beginning to collapse. Vanessa spent most of her days making phone calls behind closed doors. Brianna attended emergency meetings with public relations consultants and corporate advisors. Neither woman knew exactly what evidence Isaac had left behind, but both understood the danger. If enough information became public, years of planning could disappear overnight. Within days, stories began appearing online. Anonymous sources claimed Jasmine was attempting to seize control of Carter Logistics after manipulating her grandfather during his final years. Articles questioned her motives. Social media accounts accused her of greed. Some stories even suggested she had fabricated evidence against her own family. The campaign spread quickly. Jasmine first learned about it when a neighbor forwarded one of the articles. Although she tried to ignore the attacks, seeing strangers discuss her character without knowing her was painful. Fortunately, Daniel had expected something similar. He advised her not to respond publicly. "The truth doesn't become stronger because you argue about it online," he said. "The evidence will speak for itself when the time comes." Back in Atlanta, the media campaign initially had its intended effect. Marcus Carter continued defending Vanessa whenever questions arose. Yet the confidence he once had was slowly disappearing. Several days earlier, Daniel had delivered copies of selected documents to Marcus under instructions Isaac left before his death. Marcus had reluctantly reviewed them. The financial records disturbed him. The recording disturbed him even more. For years, he had trusted Vanessa's explanations without demanding proof. Now, for the first time, he found himself revisiting countless conversations from the past. Small details he once ignored suddenly seemed significant. Promises that never materialized. Recommendations that always benefited the same people. Conflicts that somehow always involved Jasmine. The more Marcus examined the evidence, the more uncomfortable he became. Deep inside, a painful possibility was beginning to take shape. What if his father had been right all along? 3 days before the shareholder meeting, another crisis struck. Jasmine woke early and immediately sensed something was wrong. Sonny was alone. Honey was missing. At first, Jasmine assumed the small puppy had wandered into another room. She searched the kitchen, living room, guest rooms, and library. Nothing. Her concern quickly turned into panic. Honey never wandered far from either Jasmine or Sonny. The tiny golden retriever was naturally cautious and easily frightened. Security staff searched the grounds. No one found her. Then the estate security director discovered something alarming. A section of fencing near the eastern property line had been cut during the night. The security footage revealed a shadowy figure entering the estate shortly after midnight. The image quality was poor. The intruder wore dark clothing and kept his face hidden. Several minutes later, the same figure left, carrying something small in his arms. Jasmine felt sick. Sonny seemed to understand that something was wrong as well. The normally playful puppy wandered through the house, whining softly, repeatedly, searching areas where Honey often slept. Watching him only intensified Jasmine's fear. Honey had already experienced abandonment once. The thought of her being frightened and alone somewhere was unbearable. For the next 2 days, Jasmine barely slept. Search efforts expanded across the surrounding area. Flyers were distributed. Private investigators hired by Daniel joined the search. Despite their efforts, no trace of Honey appeared. Then another message arrived. Daniel and Evelyn returned to Charleston with final preparations for the shareholder meeting. According to Isaac's instructions, crucial evidence would be presented publicly during the gathering. Once disclosed, it would expose years of deception and permanently alter the future of Carter Logistics. The meeting was now only days away. That evening, Jasmine sat alone in the library reviewing documents when her phone rang. The number was blocked. She answered immediately. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then a distorted male voice emerged from the speaker. "If you want to see Honey alive again," the caller said calmly, "don't attend the shareholder meeting." The line went dead. A light rain fell over Atlanta on the morning of the shareholder meeting, but by sunrise the clouds had begun to break apart. Thin rays of sunlight spread across the city as if the day itself was preparing to reveal something long hidden. Jasmine Carter barely slept after the anonymous phone call. The threat had been simple and terrifying. If she appeared at the shareholder meeting, Honey might never come home. For several hours, she sat awake in the library overlooking the ocean, listening to the waves and holding Sonny close. The little golden retriever seemed restless, repeatedly looking toward the front door, as though expecting his companion to return at any moment. Jasmine understood the feeling. Part of her wanted to abandon everything and focus only on finding Honey. Yet another part remembered what Isaac had spent years preparing. If she backed down now, the truth might disappear forever. By sunrise, she made her decision. She would not run. Daniel Brooks and Evelyn Ross arrived early that morning along with 2 investigators who had quietly worked for Isaac Carter for several years. The lead investigator was Theodore Grant, a 67-year-old African-American former federal agent with broad shoulders, deep-set brown eyes, and a neatly trimmed gray beard. Decades earlier, Theodore had lost his own daughter in a custody dispute that exposed corruption inside a wealthy family. Since then, he had developed little patience for people who used money and influence to escape accountability. Isaac trusted him because Theodore valued facts more than reputation. After reviewing the security footage and phone records connected to Honey's disappearance, Theodore believed the puppy had never been taken far from Charleston. His team moved quickly. Less than 4 hours later, they found a breakthrough. A witness reported seeing a small cream-colored puppy inside an abandoned fishing storage building several miles from the coast. Theodore contacted local authorities and arrived at the location with investigators. Honey was discovered frightened but unharmed inside a locked room. Nearby, investigators recovered a waterproof case containing additional documents stolen from Isaac's estate during the break-in. Whoever organized the kidnapping had clearly intended to delay Jasmine long enough to prevent certain records from reaching Atlanta. When Honey was finally returned to her, Jasmine dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around the trembling puppy. Tears filled her eyes as Honey pressed against her chest. Sonny barked it excitedly and immediately began licking Honey's face. Watching the reunion strengthened Jasmine's resolve. Whoever orchestrated this believed fear could control her decisions. They were wrong. That afternoon, the grand auditorium at Carter Logistics headquarters filled with shareholders, investors, executives, journalists, and attorneys. More than 500 people attended. Television cameras lined the rear walls. Reporters occupied entire rows. Conversations filled the room as speculation spread about the growing controversy surrounding the Carter family. Marcus Carter sat near the front. He looked older than he had only weeks earlier. The confident executive, who once controlled every room he entered, had been replaced by a tired man, struggling to understand how much of his life had been built on deception. For days, he had reviewed Isaac's evidence. Each document forced him to confront mistakes he no longer knew how to defend. The realization that he had allowed suspicion to replace trust, where his daughter was concerned, weighed heavily on him. Vanessa and Brianna sat several seats away. Neither woman appeared comfortable. Vanessa's calm elegance remained intact on the surface, but tension showed in her eyes. Brianna repeatedly checked her phone, as if hoping for news that would somehow stop what was coming. When the meeting officially began, Daniel Brooks stepped onto the stage. The room became silent. Over the next hour, evidence was presented methodically. Financial records, emails, corporate memoranda, trust documents, witness statements, audio recordings. One by one, the pieces assembled into a complete picture. The audience listened in stunned silence as it became clear that Vanessa had spent years manipulating information presented to Marcus. The false emails used against Jasmine were exposed. The financial reports Vanessa prepared were examined alongside contradictory records she had concealed. Several transactions involving funds intended for Jasmine's future were traced directly to decisions influenced by Vanessa's recommendations. Then came the recording, the same recording Jasmine had discovered in Charleston. Vanessa's own words echoed through the auditorium. There was no explaining them away, no alternative interpretation, no misunderstanding. The truth stood on its own. Additional evidence revealed that Brianna had known about much of the deception. While she had not created every scheme herself, she had helped conceal information and benefited from the arrangements. Shock spread through the room. Some shareholders looked furious. Others simply appeared disappointed. Years of carefully constructed appearances collapsed within a single afternoon. Then Daniel presented the final piece of evidence, a collection of letters written by Isaac Carter. In them, Isaac repeatedly stated that Jasmine had never expressed any desire to control Carter Logistics. He explained that she consistently chose work helping others over pursuing corporate power. Multiple witnesses confirmed the same conclusion. For the first time, the entire room understood something Marcus had failed to see. Jasmine never wanted the company. She never had. When the presentation ended, Marcus remained seated for several seconds. Then he lowered his head into his hands. The realization struck him with full force. He had thrown his own daughter out of her home. Not because of what she had done, because of lies he chose to believe. Following the meeting, independent investigators opened formal inquiries into multiple financial activities connected to Vanessa and Brianna. Both women left the building surrounded by attorneys rather than supporters. Several days later, the board of directors gathered privately. Given the evidence and Isaac's wishes, they offered Jasmine the opportunity to become the next chief executive officer of Carter Logistics. The decision shocked almost everyone. Jasmine's answer shocked them even more. She declined respectfully, without hesitation. The board members expected negotiations. There were none. Jasmine explained that she had spent her entire life being told what she should become. For once, she intended to choose her own future. Months passed. Construction began on a new organization funded through a portion of Isaac's estate. The Isaac Carter Animal Rescue Foundation expanded across Georgia, providing shelters, medical care, adoption services, and emergency support for abandoned animals. Sunny and Honey quickly became beloved symbols of the foundation. Their photographs appeared on brochures, fundraising materials, and adoption campaigns throughout the state. One autumn afternoon, several months after the shareholder meeting, Marcus arrived at the Charleston estate alone. No lawyers, no assistants, no excuses. He looked at Jasmine for a long moment before speaking. "I was wrong." The words came quietly. Marcus admitted that pride, fear, and misplaced trust had cost him years with his daughter. He acknowledged every mistake he could no longer deny. For the first time in Jasmine's life, he wasn't defending himself. He was accepting responsibility. When he finally asked for forgiveness, Jasmine thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the loneliness, the anger, the truth. "I forgive you," she said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't erase the past." Marcus nodded. He understood. Some wounds heal, others become scars carried forward with wisdom. When he left later that evening, neither of them knew exactly what their future relationship would look like. But for the first time, it was built on honesty, rather than illusion. The following spring, Jasmine stood outside the grand opening of the Foundation's largest rescue center. Hundreds of animals had already found homes through the program. Families walked through the facility meeting dogs, cats, and other rescued animals receiving a second chance. Sunny and Honey raced through the grass nearby, healthy and happy in a way that seemed impossible compared to the frightened puppies abandoned beside a gas station months earlier. As Jasmine watched them play, she thought about her mother. She thought about Isaac. She thought about the mansion, the company, and everything that had brought her to this moment. Only then did she fully understand the gift her grandfather had spent years protecting. The true inheritance was never the house. It was never the money. It was never the company. It was the freedom to build a life that reflected who she truly was. And standing there beneath the warm Georgia sunlight, surrounded by lives being saved every day, Jasmine finally realized she already possessed the most valuable thing her grandfather could have left behind: peace.